We have a special treat today, an unreleased Call of Duty game that is almost fully playable. This is a cookie that I am more than excited to delve into, especially after we looked at the COD 4 and Modern Warfare 2 beta builds previously, but I'm sure Call of Duty Future Warfare will be even more interesting. And yes, that is actually the name. The streets call it NX1, which was the internal project name. This was supposed to be released in 2013, developed by Neversoft, one of the main studios of the Guitar Hero franchise, so it's strange to see they were put in charge to make a Call of Duty, but they were for some reason. It was only a few months ago where this build was brought to the public. You do need to jump through hoops for it to actually work, utilizing Xenia Canary, which is an emulator, and a torrent software like uTorrent. And if you have an Xbox 360 dev kit, you also should be able to play it there as well. Once you get over this hurdle and launch your forbidden game, you'll immediately see this is built using Modern Warfare 2 as a base. The menus are identical. Spec Ops is also here with all the same missions. Unfortunately, the game crashes when you try to play them, so that mode is essentially worthless, leaving us with just the multiplayer and campaign, both having a lot to delve into. So staying in line with the Call of Duty 4 and Modern Warfare 2 video, we will start with the multiplayer first, where I was initially expecting all of the content to be things we've seen in later games. And obviously we have a lot of similarities from Modern Warfare 2, because again, Future Warfare was built using it. Every perk available is from Modern Warfare 2, not entirely sure if pro perks were actually going to return, but they do exist here. Death streaks look to be coming back apparently, with only one new one, which is why I believe they were going to return. They wouldn't add a new one for no reason. That being a free UAV, I'm assuming it would only be one minimap swipe, sounding alright. If it was a free 30-second UAV, that would be pretty overpowered, but I might actually rather have players who die 6 times have a free UAV than Dead Man's Hand. We got some guns from Modern Warfare 2, at least placeholders like the AA-12, Intervention, FAL, P90, the UMP, and there is also an array of new weapons never before seen, unless you've played this obviously. There is a mixture of both traditional and laser weapons. I know some people get very angry hearing that, starting to seethe and drool in anger, thinking about anything space-related being in Call of Duty. I just think it really depends on the execution. As long as they don't completely stray away from having traditional guns, it doesn't really bother me that much. Like, you gotta do change-ups here and there. These laser weapons were of course going to function differently, using a recharge system rather than regular reloading, adding that extra layer to make them feel different. We saw this used in Advanced Warfare with a few of those guns, but apparently Future Warfare was going to do it first. However, the thing I felt indifferent about was having riot shield variants. On top of the traditional, we had a camo riot shield, which would make you invisible as long as you hold it in front of yourself. It doesn't work here, there's just a glitchy white block that flickers from time to time. We were also going to have a deployable one as well, which we've seen numerous times after 2013. All the newer games have their own version of a deployable shield adjacent ability. Having this be a part of your weapon selection wouldn't have been a bad idea, honestly. My assumption is they wanted to add more team play, which is laughable for Call of Duty terms, but I guess it's the idea that counts. The active camo one though, that would have been horrible for the game. This whole active camo or invisibility thing also seemed to be a fetish of Future Warfare, because there is a camo for your gun that was supposed to do the same thing. It doesn't work here either, and it's a cool idea, but would have also been really bad for the game. No one would use anything aside from this camo since it would give you an objective advantage over everyone else. How it would have been implemented though, not entirely sure. Possibly this was the first toss around of the final dark matter type camo. This one would be deserving of it for sure. If this was the premise of Unlock, then thankfully that was recycled, just like the new kill streaks. We have 4 that I unfortunately cannot use, but the descriptions are very similar to streaks in later games, so we can get a general idea of what they were supposed to be. First is a deployable minigun turret. I hope it's obvious for what that would do. There is another one called Night Raven, which sounds exactly like the Trinity rocket that was put into Call of Duty Ghosts. Rods of God, that I assume is similar to the XS-1 Vulcan from Advanced Warfare, that giant laser coming down from the sky. And finally, we have the Ares Juggernaut, which I'm guessing would be akin to the Goliath from Advanced Warfare, Maybe it could have been different, but judging on how this is a kind of futuristic game, a mech suit is almost required to be a part of it. Every other streak here is from Modern Warfare 2, so the ones that aren't staples would have definitely been replaced by new ones, at least I'd hope so. If we move on to game modes, there are a lot of expected, but also returning ones like multi-team from Black Ops 2, a brand new one called Escort, which we will get to that one in a little bit, and a few party modes, with American Gladiator games being the most interesting. If I had to guess, this is a placeholder name. I went into a lobby hoping we could get something out of it, but all it's good for here is a limited HUD view to look at the maps. Possibly if the game released, there would have been an event or some sort of crossover mode with the show. Sadly, we'll never know. And finally, there was a bounty hunter mode, sounding like a free-for-all version of Regicide from Halo. You got a guy, everyone needs to kill him. The longer big man stays alive, they get points. I'm sure this has been in a Call of Duty game at some point as a limited time mode, if anything. But the thing that is the most important, more important than classes, kill streaks, and game modes, are the maps you play them on, which is definitely the most engaging part of this entire multiplayer. There are a lot of maps on this list, with practically all of them being completely original. Not all of them are finished, but some of them are. We can walk around, see the layouts, designs, and philosophies of how Neversoft wanted to make their game. This is pretty fucking cool to see. Maybe these assets were reused here and there later on, but if you take one like Pit Stop for example, this map I've never seen ever, not even as a DLC, unless I'm just having an Alzheimer's moment. It kind of makes me question like why they didn't bring these maps in any other game. It's not like anyone would have known. The more you play Future Warfare and walk through these maps, it's kind of depressing to think how most of this stuff just got wasted. There was going to be a variety of locations, and yes, even ones in space. You're able to see the phases each map is in, or if someone called for a redesign, and most importantly, how Osama was going to make a guest appearance, apparently. I was pissed off the map crashes when you try to open it. I really wanted to see what this was. I'm just shocked, like, was the game gonna revolve around Osama as the main enemy? Maybe it was an inside joke. Not entirely sure what was going on here. Outside of these new maps, I presume they had the idea of bringing in Crash, Terminal, and a few other throwbacks, and returning these maps to the streets, I'm sure would have made a lot of people happy. And finally, we have the Escort variant of 2 maps, tying in with the game mode, which is why I wanted to save it for now. What we are playing here is essentially the war mode that's in World War II, something that was very positively received when it was released, but it was apparently going to be implemented years before. At least on the maps we have available, one team needs to escort a tank and do other objectives like turning on a switch or capturing a point, while the other team defends by utilizing different positions and even building doors. Something I know a lot of people love to have in Call of Duty. At least when it comes to these ones, you're able to plant a C4 on it to blow the thing up. That is the only buildable here, and judging on how the war mode did it, I'm guessing there would be various walls, turrets, and other things in Escort for players to utilize on defense. But just like some of the other features I mentioned before, Future Warfare was going to do this first as well. I'm not fully sure how the streets would have accepted this multiplayer, mainly due to the whole laser weapons and space maps part, but what we have here is a solid start to a game, making me wonder what happened to get it cancelled. This was much further along than just passing ideas around on a table. We can see the direction they wanted to go in, various aspects that Neversoft were trying to implement with game modes, weapons, and maps. There's genuine substance here. It just confuses me, and that question mark becomes even larger after going through the campaign. I wasn't entirely sure what to expect going into this, but we have a few missions here that are completely new, and most importantly, playable. You need to select them individually because if you try to pick New Game or SSDD, your game will just crash. There's also all this stuff here, which are just segments of playable missions. The ones that aren't playable will just crash the game upon selection, which is quite unfortunate. And there might be some differences with the playable ones when you select them through this menu, but I'm apparently not savvy enough to realize every minute detail. I deserve to be nailed to the cross for that, I know. So purely looking at the missions, we have unique locations, visually at least, along with characters and voice acting. Private Jackson is our man of the hour, persevering through the streets with the United States, battling against the probably Russians. I know we're in Mexico, but this is Call of Duty after all. Using only Modern Warfare 2 guns, which I thought was interesting. None of the traditional guns, we'll call them, from the multiplayer exist on the Earth levels. We got our M4s and AK-47s blasting through the roads, getting into scuffles with these enemies, tossing smokes to call in a helicopter, blowing everything up. Border was just your typical Call of Duty mission. But I was stunted when I was playing through Into the Fire and saw enemies with riot shields. The model is straight out of Modern Warfare 2 rather than the newly designed one from the multiplayer side. So if I had to play Make Pretend I completely understand game development, possibly this playable campaign build is before the multiplayer. It's the only reasonable conclusion I could come up with. Why else would the riot shields be different? Outside of this, nothing is really too different. Speaking from the general experience, I should say, because obviously these are missions that we've never played before. But even with the lack of differences in these Earth missions, you're still going to get an experience of intrigue and also sadness of the wasted time and effort put into these. Obviously, no one knows what is happening here throughout these missions or why. Dialogue is brief and there are no opening cutscenes yet, so all I can say is that I fought through the streets, snuck through a hospital to kidnap a doctor, killed someone on life support, killed police, and finally transcended into space, where we fight on a space train. You do need to be careful while playing through this mission though, because I fell through the ground and got stuck multiple times. When it actually does work, we can see at a base level how low gravity gunfights would play out. Maybe this would have been in the multiplayer on the maps that supported it. That could have been a pretty interesting deviation away from the traditional boots on the ground gameplay, rather than implementing exosuits. It still probably would have been ridiculed by the general public, but depending on the implementation, it could have been pretty good. There are also 2 weapons that we can use on these space missions that were not in the multiplayer, at least in the build I played, because who knows, there could be plenty of different ones that I don't even know about. But they were the Hera 82, which is I think an SMG that sounds and feels quite powerful, a pistol shotgun thing reminding me a lot of the bolt shot from Halo 4, and there was an SMG with a different name, but it's just the mini Uzi. These were the only weapons. There wasn't a single laser weapon in sight. We're on the moon, so it's kinda shocking not to see them. Maybe they wanted to keep the game as plausible as possible, since if you write the story correctly, laser guns could be put into the game in a logical way, and if you look at how they implemented a system similar to a health pack, when you take damage, your suit power, oxygen meter, I'm not fully sure what it is, goes down and does not refill on its own, so you need to pick up little stims to get that meter back to full, instead of just being a superhuman character that can breathe in space with the ultimate visor in front of your face. Your allies and enemies are also just wearing regular spacesuits as well. I said it as kind of a joke, but the more you look at what Neversoft was doing, you could build a slightly plausible and realistic game on the moon. Of course, there would be some ridiculous stuff like these flying robots shooting at us, since you might as well take some creative agency. But judging on how there is a mixture of being on Earth and somehow getting to space, also the space areas not being too far-fetched, Future Warfare seemed it was going to be a more realistic, futuristic game, if that makes sense. I think if the futuristic things were implemented more grounded in reality, people may have been more open to it. Call of Duty sort of implemented the whole advanced movement thing too abruptly, giving people whiplash upon playing Advanced Warfare. It was just too much too soon. I didn't mind those games, but I know a lot of people do, and you can't blame them for it since it was a major shift in gameplay from what Call of Duty always was. So I think if they eased players into it, it would have been a much better way to handle the whole situation. Unfortunately, Descent, which is the mission with the space train, and Moonbase Assault are the only 2 playable space missions, which was really unfortunate. I definitely wanted to try more of them, but I can't. Winter Anvil, Operation Deadbolt, and Hit Hard at Home do not work. But I've seen footage of other missions that I don't have access to, possibly one of the aforementioned ones, so maybe there's something I'm missing, which could be the case. But the one thing I can say for certain is this. If Call of Duty ever wants to take the whole space direction again, Future Warfare's ideas might be the way to go. It could make for a good story if they do it right, and if Future Warfare were to have released, this could have been a pretty good game. It's crazy how much stuff that's in Future Warfare, mainly with the multiplayer, that was carried into games after it. There was a lot this game was going to do that I'm sure would have made a lot of people have a good time while playing it. And we have other small things that I didn't even mention earlier, like the first idea of a firing range. The KSG shotgun icon is a placeholder for a different shotgun that would have been able to swap between regular shells and slugs on the fly, believe it or not, a brand new thing at the time. A more balanced stock attachment, giving the player agency to adjust it when they wanted to, instead of it just giving you higher mobility while aiming down sight. You had to activate it to get the higher ADS mobility at the cost of more recoil, which are all pretty interesting and creative additions. But I didn't want to list every single little thing out since 1, I'm not trying to roleplay as a patch note teleprompter, and 2, I wanted to save some discoveries for people who play this. I just wanted to share what I thought were the biggest implementations and features stuck in here, at least for what I could play. Since I'm sure there's stuff I missed with the campaign, maybe returning characters or characters taken out of this game and put into a future game, I couldn't play them all, so I have no idea. But playing this for yourself is 100% worth the time to do. You do need to jump through some hoops, but to play an unreleased Call of Duty game, why not? I am sadly still stuck questioning why Future Warfare wasn't released. Maybe it was business related, like Activision didn't have faith in this project, so they demoted Neversoft to a side studio. Neversoft did have a hand in developing Advanced Warfare, where they were shut down afterwards, making Future Warfare the last game they themselves were a lead on, which was obviously cancelled, so Neversoft had a bad time during their later years. Unfortunately, I won't have a download link because I know how Activision is with these sorts of things. Knowing my luck, they'll probably sniff it out and take this down, but finding the download is more than easy to do. As always, thank you guys for watching to the end. Be sure to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and also check out my last video on a Call of Duty game that actually released and sucks.